crossover with like Control Paladin and Secret Mage. They're doing almost completely different things because the matchups that Control Paladin is weak against, Secret Mage is good against, and you'd think, oh well, it shorts up its weaknesses. Well, maybe in Last Hero Standing that'd be good, but in Conquest, maybe not necessarily, because your lineup's trying to do too many things at once. But we are going to get underway, and right off the bat.
That mulligan looks almost like a real Hearthstone deck.
The funny thing to me is that it's almost like we didn't even have a shaman icon prepared for Ghost. Because it's the Druid icon currently. Nobody expected anybody to bring shaman. It snuck through the cracks.
I expected there to be 1 or 2 shaman, but I expected them to be evolved shaman, not like Jade Shaman.
Not Kibler Shaman.
Not Kibler Shaman, yeah, right, exactly.
I don't think Kibler made the deck, but he plays it probably more than anybody else, it feels, especially recently. Well, we do have the Shaman icon because I just saw it. All right, double Murmuring Elemental in the opening hand, but no elementals to use with it.
The light shall burn you.
So what do you think of this matchup, Sottle?
Great question, TJ. Glad you asked. Devolve will actually be a decent card for sure, because essentially this deck is just playing piles of stats, right? Like Devolve hitting a Twilight Drake, Devolve hitting Cobalt Scalebane, Draconid Operative, whatever it is. They're very, very useful. Whether the Jakattack can like hold on long enough for his late game cards to actually come into play is a question, because Jade Shamans classically develop a little bit slower than say Jade Druid used to do. They don't really overwhelm you like Jade Druid can, so Priest probably has a little bit of time to set up. And Duskbreakers, as in most matchups, will of course be fantastic against Shaman, because those cards alone will get you through the entire early game, like all the way up to 3/3 Jades, plus any irritating totems and stuff that come down. Just dunzo with 1 card from Duskbreaker.
But just the sheer amount of Jades that this deck can push out is actually quite large.
Yes.
It's a large amount. Because you have Rummaging Kobolds for Jade Claws, you have Grumble Worldshaker for Jade Spirits.
Yep.
You have Aya Blackpaw. So it doesn't, of course, reach the level of Jade Druid, but you also have sort of this little extra oomph with like Bloodlust,
right?
To push and end the game, and maybe a better removal overall. Removal that includes Crushing Hand.
And there you go. Straight away, you can see that one of the cards you didn't mention, although we did touch on it right away at the start, is Murmuring Elemental gets you more Jades as well, doubling your Battle Cries. And J-Claw is a pretty unique weapon, being a Battle Cry weapon in itself. Gets straight up to those 2/2 Jades. And it's already looking like Jakattack might have to throw out a Duskbreaker in the near future if this board gets any wider.
And there it is, the Rummaging Kobolds. Pure value, so to speak.
You saw one of the interactions I was talking about. Devolve hitting that Twilight Drake is just always such a huge stat reduction. Twilight Drake, when it comes down, is so often very, very overstatted for a 4-mana minion, and it doesn't have any immediate effect on the board, which makes it a prime Devolve target. He got the Worgen out of it, which is, a decent shot for a 3/3 for 3 mana, just pretty solid, but GhostASA are able to deal with it very, very easily just with that J-Claws.
The thought here is whether or not he wants to break the Jade Claws. I don't think he attacked with it that turn.
No, he killed the Worgen with it. He killed it with a 1/1 Jade and the J-Claws.
Maybe just planning out his future turns.
Yeah. It's not even like he would be like representing any card in hand, because there are no 1-mana cards in his entire deck that he could represent having. There is Duskbreaker number 1. But there goes the J-Claws.
There goes the neighborhood.
And this is kind of problematic, because if Duskbreaker number 2 comes down here, Jakattack is going to be well out of removal. So yeah, the silence option does seem a lot more solid in this position, just be able to contest the board state, make sure he has a Duskbreaker to fall back on in the future.
Yeah, and of course the double Coiled Oracles, a card that we didn't mention, that's in the deck from Ghost. One of the things that Shaman struggles with is card draw.
Yes.
Outside of Mana-Tide Totem, they don't have great class card draw, and Cold Oracle, especially in what his strategy seems to be as a control buster, also serves a similar purpose of potentially overdrawing your opponent if their hand is too full. Kind of the same theory that we had with King Mukla and the bananas. Cold Oracle kind of just makes sense with his strategy.
Yeah.
And he's actually has, across all of his decks, 6 Cold Light Oracles in his 4 decks. 2 in his Paladin, 2 in his Shaman, and 2 in that Quest Rogue. So when people bring out Orthodox decks, I can respect the fact that if they bring wacky stuff, it at least has a plan and it's consistent, and that plan is consistent.
Right. Like, you know, you can look at a lineup like this and like, well, I'm not sure if it's going to work. Like, fine. You know, you can have that opinion on any lineup. But you should always be able to look at any given lineup and say, here is the plan, and here are the consistent choices that he has made that follow this plan through. And like, GhostASA has for sure done that.
And a much better Dustbreaker here, because he also sort of protects his Cabal Songstealer and can continue pushing damage. And I don't really know how well this deck functions from behind, because it doesn't have the big sweeping removals like Volcano,
right?
That sometimes you see in more control-y Shamans.
Right.
It's got Devolve, Maelstrom Portal, and Crushing Hand. But we'll be able to start increasing this Jade count and just sort of not removing but contesting the board with minions of his own. And now that he's seen both Dustbreakers, he can be pretty confident that there's going to be no more removal, because this deck does not have any more removal.
Right.
Except for Mind Control.
Yeah, and the other thing it doesn't have is damage. Right, like that's one of the big weaknesses of Spiteful Priest. It doesn't matter when you stabilize against the deck. If you stabilize at 1, you might as well be at 30. You know, you're not dying from that position. So GhostASA not panicking, even though he's at 19 and there's just 8 more damage smacking him in the face here. He just goes for max board development. He doesn't really have a great deal of removal to follow this up, but he knows that he has to get stats on board to contest. And are we about to see the competitive return of Hex?
I thought you were going to say the competitive return of Crushing Hand. Don't even ask me that question, because I have 0 answer. It's going to be pretty good in this instance, but he's not. There's no development going on. So he's going to be in a similar position next turn when Jakattack reloads, and then he doesn't have the Hex, but he will have all the mana available to him. So, and at this point, you probably just jam Cold Oracle, because your opponent probably has everything they need to reload anyway.
Yeah.
So giving them more options in, well, it goes with the totem up. I don't know, I feel like I'd want more options and not care about my opponent having more options when I'm in this position.
Right. I mean, there's also the point is that, like, if he was going to Oracle, he should have done that first. Regardless.
So it was the old
I was gonna say,
cover up the misplay by not doing it at all. Yeah.
You can get into, like, I'm just a tiny bit embarrassed right now territory, and just, like, maybe talk yourself out of it at the last minute. But, yeah, who knows.
Like, I'm left with 2 mana as a Warlock, and I forgot to tap before my turn started, and so I just don't tap. And I'm like, oh, it's planned. I don't want to take the 2 damage.
Oh, like, good players don't tap anymore, TJ. Did you not get the memo? Since Surrender, the best play is always to not tap.
I didn't get that memo, actually.
Okay.
I'm not on the good players mailing list yet.
No, me either. Don't worry about it.
I've not been approved by who would be the chairman of the Good Players Club.
Probably Zixo.
Zixo.
It's a self-appointed position. Let me be very clear.
Yeah. And the assistant chairman is probably Tic Tac.
Right.
Is someone injured?
This is kind of what I was talking about earlier, though. Like, this board state is going to get massive again because of that Archivist. But as long as you don't immediately die, you can stabilize very, very easily against this board state. Devolve will get rid of the Nostormu effect, allow him to think through the rest of his turn.
Oh, no!
But he devolves it just into another Archivist.
Yikes.
That is disgusting. And Jakattack has the suitable I would say has the face of a man who just got a 2nd Grand Archivist from Devolve. But that's literally just his face all the time.
That's my face right now, too.
Yeah.
MFW, I'm Jakattack.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I've actually never seen that animation before.
But he's getting there, you know?
It's quite aggressive.
He's well on the road to stabilizing. as unlikely as it seemed on a couple of turns.
But what does he do for continued threats? He's out of stuff.
He finds a turn where he can play Aya without dying and then just uses minions for the rest of the game? I guess.
Yeah, but that's incredibly unlikely. Because he won't have a turn to play.
Sure.
Presenting lethal every turn. Plays Jinyu. There's no Volcano. There's no Devolves left.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I will say, yes, it's looking unpleasant because he has no more answers. But that was Duskbreaker number 3 that put him in that, like, awkward spot. Otherwise, he would have had a few minions hanging around on the board. The first 2, really, he was actually ahead in the early games. He actually had, like, a better start because of the synergy with the J-Claws early on. And then it took the double Duskbreaker early to shut that down. So, you know, Jakattack had a pretty good draw to shut this deck down. Like, it didn't look like one of those, like, hopeless meme decks that we sometimes see in tournament, and he's done very well to be to this point. This is now round 3 of winners for him, so...
Yeah.
The deck has performed, and we will probably see it again at some point this series, but for now, at least, it's looking like it's going to be a quick 1-0 to Jakattack in Game 1.
Ghost thinking through, but, I mean, there's not really much to think through. Even Taunt Totem doesn't allow him to. Maybe he's just thinking about, hey, what deck do I want to queue next? What's going to be my game plan going into the next game? But he is thoroughly dead. And Jakattack's riding some momentum. This is the 7th game he's won in a row.
Is that true? He 3-0, 3-0?
He didn't 3-0 his first match, but I'm pretty sure he reverse swept.
Oh, I got you. You're right. Yeah, in a row. I see.
So he's riding that momentum train. He had at least a 3-0 in the last series, and I think his first series of the day. But it's at least 5 wins, game wins in a row now for him. So feeling on fire. He's a confident guy, too. Just sort of struts around, throwing out New Zealand memes.
I was going to say, I'm not sure if his confidence would be the word I use, because, you know, his interview is basically saying, like, you know, I turn up if I lose. It's just, like, average New Zealander.
I'm an average New Zealand player.
Yeah. I don't know if you can quite describe that line as coming from a man of confidence. What's up?
If I win, I'm the beast. Like my New Zealand accent?
Yep. It's just a man who walks around talking about his deck all day.
Yeah. Gosh darn right he does.
So Shaman falls at the first hurdle. But he does still have the Shaman. Again, to recap, the decks that are available with his Quest Rogue band, his Jade Shaman that we just saw, his Charge OTK Jungle Giants Quest Druid, and his King Mukla, King Togwaggle, Auction Master Beardo, OTK Control Paladin.
But Sada, which part's the OTK?
It's... when was the last time we saw a lineup this strange was Rojo, right? Like, that's the only thing I can think of that comes close to this in, like, a major tournament.
But it wasn't even that weird. He just brought full control. In his list, there weren't anything that was a crazy card.
Sure.
It was just all of the anti-aggro cards and no win condition outside of running his opponent out of resources. Whereas this, like, you could see the purpose of every card in the deck, even if the purpose was unconventional.
Okay. How about Frozen with, like, the full hard target strategy?
You could see the purpose in the list.
Okay.
Even if the purpose was unconventional.
So you're saying this is the weirdest lineup you've ever seen, is essentially what we're boiling down to.
At least one weird deck.
Okay.
Because I can see the purpose of the Quest Druid. It's to summon a crap load of Charged Devilsaurs and kill your opponent in a single turn.
Yeah.
But King Mukla and Togwaggle. It's to play your opponent's, force your opponent to play your deck because you know your deck's worse.
By Jove, you cracked it, TJ.
I really want to see the Druid in action, though.
I do too, actually. I played a number of different Quest Druid decks, and I do feel like they're semi-competitive at least. Like the one that Monsanto brought to playoffs did work for me on ladder at one point, and then recently like the one that Blaine built with a very similar deck, and now this is a completely different build with the Charge OTK. But The introduction of Oaken Summons and Curse Disciple has basically made Quest Druid like right on the fringe, essentially, just because it became so much easier to complete your quest with just those 2 cards.
Yeah.
And at that point, like when your quest can be completed so consistently, at that point it does feel like the world's your oyster, right? Like any number of ridiculous things should be possible when you can make your deck cost 0.
Before the Quarter Creeper nerf, it was I think it was competitive.
Okay.
It was like tier 4.
Sure.
But it could be played.
Mm-hmm.
But now it just feels like you have to put in suboptimal choices to be able to finish the quest. Because before, you had the Oaken Summons to get Curse Disciple, and then you could play Quarter Creeper for free a lot of times.
No way! What a novel concept!
Whoa! And now that Quarter Creeper doesn't contribute to the quest progress, then you have to play some more 5-cost minions that you can't cheat out like the other 2, sort of. So you have to play Darker Koa or
right.
Lich King. So it's just a little bit too slow for some of the faster decks, especially on the ladder.
Either way, that will come later. For now, we are back on the Shaman. And this, I suspect, might be a little bit of a better matchup for the deck.
Guess is as good as mine.
Or perhaps even better.
Most likely better.
Synergy is back, though. These J-Claw synergies do keep coming together in the opening turns, at least of the 2 games that we've seen so far. Going Beetle over Loot Hoarder with, of course, J-Claws in mind, making sure that he retains some board presence, doesn't just drop a Loot Hoarder and just start falling behind way too early.
But Ghost knows that he's going to be able to pick up a few draws for Mana-Tide Totem.
Yeah.
Because there's not really anything that's going to contest it with just a 2-attack minion on board. So I'd like to play there with the coin.
It's changed a little bit. Like, if you go back a year or more, every iteration of Shaman that played Mana-Tide Totem against every iteration of Paladin would essentially coin Mana-Tide Totem because there was just no interaction. There was just no card that affected the board early enough to be relevant. Now, basically every Paladin deck has switched from True Silver to Rallying Play, which means there is counterplay to that early Mana-Tide, but it's still just those 2 cards. So it makes sense to use your coin that way, I guess.
But this turn is maybe a little bit tougher. If you play second Mana-Tide Totem, then there's a world where Jakattack leaves them up and just lets you draw a lot of cards. Because the deck, the early mana plays are very situational, like the 2-drops. So you can't unload your hand that quickly, but that's a tough decision to make when you're in the Paladin shoes. Like, well, my opponent's drawing 2 cards a turn. I can stop it now if I want to, but do I let him keep drawing and try and play that plan where you force him to play suboptimally because he has to get rid of cards?
Right. It's particularly awkward, you know, with Shaman being the class that gets into this situation where Mana-Tide can stick to the board and be used to fill your hand up, because Shaman is also the class that has Overload, which can then make it very difficult to just keep dumping cards out of your hand over and over again, turn after turn.
And Cold Light Oracles.
And Cold Light Oracles.
And Harrison Jones. Not that it'll make a big deal in this one, because the weapons that it would destroy would come later on in the game, and you're probably going to Hex Tyrion when it comes out, so. But again, Shaman traditionally struggling with card draw.
Yep.
So Harrison Jones in a meta that has quite a bit of weapons with Skull of Minari, with Alaneth and Secret Mage, with generic Paladin weapons, Uther plus Tyrion plus Rallying Blade in the more aggressive list, plus Maul in the more aggressive lists. It makes sense. Going for the spell power. Doesn't nail it.
Call to Arms is just such a silly card.
Yeah?
Yep. I have no follow-up to that. It was a standalone statement that I will leave just hanging out there on the air.
Yeah. Just gonna let it sit for a bit. Silly cards.
That was better. That sounds more like me.
I'm so silly cards.
No. We've gone the wrong way again.
This is actually a scary board state, but the thing about it is Jakattack can't really play any spells.
No.
Because it'll destroy his own board. But he can start chipping away slowly, bits at a time.
Yeah. He doesn't really have... It's not like the deck plays a bunch of spells that you just want to use for development anyway. Like, you have your Equalities and Consecrations. That's about it. You know, Spike Ridge Steed can be huge to ramp up pressure or be a big defensive play later on. But the deck can function very, very well without it. So just having Pyros hanging around on the board is just perfectly fine.
Missed sequencing.
Yep.
He should have got the Mana Worm first.
He should have. What a fool.
Hex is looking mighty fine in that hand. Looking at all these cards. Probably wishes he had more. But Spike Ridge Steed plus Tyrion
Reporting for duty.
going to be able to be stopped in their tracks by the Hex. Now, Ghost hasn't really ramped up his Jade counts yet.
Nope.
But he does have a decent amount of time to do so. It's just right now he doesn't have many Jades to begin with. I guess he has Rummaging Kobold plus Jade Spirit, but beyond that, not much to work with. Crushing Hand probably doesn't want to come down on a Dirty Rat or a Loot Hoarder. Bring it on back. Here it is.
Silly card number 2, right on time.
Actually, Dilsta still does have the full suite of 2-drops left in the deck, so he's able to pull Dirty Rat, Loot Hoarder, Plated Beetle again.
Right.
And Jakattack looking like he's kind of smooth sailing. Being able to thin his deck like this means he's closer to those bigger cards in his deck. Burgley Bullies, Uther of the Ebon Blade, and outside of Genuine Water Speakers, this Shaman deck from Ghost doesn't have a way to stifle that pressure, but I guess he has weapon removal, so he shouldn't have to worry about that much in the end. Can Jakattack OTK for the second time in one day?
It could happen. I mean, if he stays ahead on board and he gets a Burgley Bully down, it's not really something that Shaman's able to deal with particularly well without throwing a Jade Lightning or something similar at it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of Hex targets left in the deck. It's likely that's going to come out before Burgley Bully with Tyrion and Spike Ridge Steed there. So he's just not developing quickly enough to get over the hump. Sort of the same situation that we saw earlier when he was playing against the Spiteful Priest, where the deck looks like it's functioning correctly, but he doesn't quite get to that point where he stabilizes. It looks like it's functioning how it was designed to function. It's just not quite good enough.
He's going to jam the Tyrion. He's probably not expecting any huge fireworks from it. He knows there's double weapon destruction plus hexes plus devolves in his opponent's deck.
Yeah.
He gave a lot of respect to devolve earlier. He had a really clean turn, I think just on 6 to drop Spike Ridge Steed. It would have been a very dominant board position, but just gave a lot of respect to what Devolve would represent in that position. But, you know, Devolve hitting Tyrion is not the end of the world. If it gets hexed, then sure, he's probably not getting full value out of the Ashbringer anyway because of the double weapon destruction. So it makes sense, honestly, just to curve this out, drop it on 8.
Not a great follow-up to Hex. Could attack Crushing Hand Harrison Jones, but then he'd have a full hand and not have any other cards to play.
Right.
And also be overloaded next turn. And then he'd also take 6, which is kind of scary from his perspective. So it seems like Hex is the right way, but then Cold Light Oracle, in which case you'd Cold Light Oracle first to try and pick up something different. I don't know, that's tough. He just doesn't have any of those synergy cards in his hand. Like nothing to couple with the Murmuring Elemental. No weapon to destroy with the 2 weapon destructions. No big minions to kill with the Crushing Hands. No minions to Bloodlust.
extra sad for Ghost because he had his Kalamos activation that turn with the Elemental on the previous turn, and just it wasn't a good turn for Kalamos to come down, so now he has to reset all of that, wait like a bunch more turns to set it all up again.
Reporting for duty.
There goes the Spike Ridge, and there is the Bully now. It's coming to hand. He does have Bully and Beardo already, plus adaptations in hand, ready to go.
Yeah. So
It's
2 coins plus an adaptation is... Plus, of course, Uther being active.
Yep.
The Uther hero power is enough for the OTK. Or 3 coins. That's a little bit harder.
Especially if you waste all your coins on the Togwaggle.
On the Togwaggle! And then at that point, you don't even have your own deck. So you have your opponent's deck. So you don't even have Uther or Burgly Bullies anymore. So actually, that just means it makes more sense, because why would you need the coins for Archmaster Beard or
That's
OTK
true. Yeah.
when you can't even OTK anymore because you gave your opponent your deck and forced them to keep it?
Fair point. You got me there. That second Bully is huge, though. Now having both in play means that he is pretty much checkmated this situation.
Yeah, and there's key plays that Ghost can make where he fills his hand with coins and then forces him to overdraw Uther, which is the top card of his deck, but then he also has to deal with the 8 damage that's coming from Burgly Bullies.
Yep.
So it's not going to get there, and didn't play an Elemental last turn, so can't try and clear the board with Kalamos.
Yeah, nor can he heal with same said card.
So he has to double Crushing Hands?
Sick.
Question mark?
Mm-hmm. I guess?
He could just get away with 1 Crushing Hand, actually.
He's going to dump his hand and then double Cold Light? Is that the plan? Yeah, looks that way. Yeah.
Well, this will overdraw.
He's going for it.
Consecration. Second there. There'll be 1 more card overdrawn.
Yep. It's a great spot, honestly. It's the equality that goes down. So Jakattack has dodged the bullet for now, but he knows there is a second Cold Light Oracle in Ghost deck, and he just drew a bunch of cards to get towards that. So yeah, Jack's going to just dump his hand. Since he has so many coins, he doesn't need these adaptations.
Oh, Wind Fury, +3
anymore.
attack.
Yeah, I guess
Nails it!
That is just lethal.
Lethal, exact lethal. And a pretty interesting spot from Jakattack. He could have also, if he didn't get that, just played Ragnaros Lightlord. And Ghost was overloaded a huge amount the following turn.
Right.
So gave himself some more options should he have not hit the 2 things that he needed from adaptation to find lethal. But Shaman deck not getting there. Just not getting there. It always feels like it almost turns the corner.
That is the face of a man who appreciates a good frog lethal, right there.
Yes, it is. My man.
TJ just air high-fived across the studio. For a moment, Jakattack's hand went up to the skies. It looked like he was ready to receive, but he just had an itchy head.
He just had an itchy head. He can't even see me.
Nope. We've actually had to put a partition in between TJ
so
and Jack.
Jakattack can't high-five me
Yep.
across the studio.
100% true.
I just want to give Ghost a high-five right now, too.
It's all right, buddy. It's more of a consoling high five, though.
I like your decks. High five. Don't play Shaman again. Show me Druid. High five.
I do really want to see the Druid in action. You know, far be it from me to tell Ghost what he does with his time, but I would love to see this Druid on stream.
I'm in agreement with you. I feel anticipatory of the fact that we might get to see Druid.
Watch and learn as TJ slowly creates his own language from scratch.
You tell me what the feeling of anticipation
I think
is.
that's probably right. Yeah.
I'm probably not even using it correctly. It may be a real word. I don't make up words. I just make up additional uses to words.
Sure. Well, GhostASA makes up additional uses for Hearthstone cards. That is something that we are very quickly learning.
Right. Actually, I don't know which one I want to see, but I think we've seen enough of Shaman. I want to see either the Druid or the Paladin. We have to be missing something. Think, Subtle. Think.
What do you want from me?
Think of every interaction that could possibly happen with King Mukla and King Togwaggle. Think.
I am. I'll sit and think. You can carry the ball.
There they are.
Oh, there they are.
Just keep
Best friends forever.
Oh man.
That's just a 4 keep, right? Like this is the core of the deck right there.
I think you maybe throw away Equality. That's the one that I'm questioning the choice for the deck is the Equality.
I'm questioning all kinds of choices right now.
If he keeps King Togwaggle and King Mukla, we definitely miss something. I mean, you're probably keeping Mukla. Okay.
Okay. Honestly, memes aside, yeah, that mulligan makes sense. King Mukla, if your opponent is just intending to just go like tap Giant or whatever, King Mukla can punish them super early. Acidic Swampoos is obviously the card you want to shut down Skull of the Minari, so yeah. In reality world, not just Sottle and TJ are having a bunch of fun right now world, yeah, that's the right mulligan. Are you having fun, TJ? I'm having fun.
No, I'm not, because we're actually seeing a practical use for King Mukla instead of my completely impractical use for it. So I'm a little bit disappointed, but he's 2-0 right now in the tournament.
Yeah.
So he has a plan. And with a plan from Taiwan.
Close enough. I'll allow it.
Let me think.
Air Power Pass. Control Paladin Classic. That was probably like a genuine debate from Ghost about like how much pressure he really wanted to put on in the matchup. Like, is 3-2 go ever like a viable strategy in that position?
And we're about to see it.
Yep. On curve Mukla, 2 bananas goes up to 10. Jack gives
that's
the...
also a man that can appreciate...
Oh!
Whoa! King Mukla is the best card in the game.
That's one way to kill a Void Lord without 3 down, 1 3s coming out of
yeah.
it.
Holy moly.
Trust me.
I think Ghost is the best player in the world.
I agree. Move over, 6-0. You are no longer the self-appointed
Ghost is
chairman.
now the chairman of the Good Players Club.
Follow the rules.
Outdoor Peacekeeper is a card that kind of got lost in the shuffle of us just talking about all the ridiculous things that are in this deck, but it's actually not core to Control Paladin anymore. Like, it's not in a lot of the builds that we're seeing in this tournament.
Because it's always been such a powerful tool, and if you look at the lineup, especially when you look at his ban strategy, there's a lot of targets for it, because if you're expecting a meta with a lot of the Spiteful decks, plus Cube Warlock, like the greedy Cube Warlock, it just has a lot of uses. Mountain Giants, the Spiteful Summoner targets.
Right.
Even against like Big Priest, it can, get those bad boys down.
Yeah.
And he does have Spellbreaker as well, so we could be looking at a situation where Ghost, his lineup is trying to get through these Cube Warlocks.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, all jokes aside, I think that's probably the case, and it was the point I was leading into. Like, you keep pressing me to find a usage for this Togwaggle, but at the end of the day, the Mukla does make sense in this matchup for exactly what you just saw. And then the Outdoors being included in there as a tech card, which it kind of is now at this point, as weird as that sounds. Well, yeah, one of the ways you could lose what's probably a good matchup for you is that just an 8-8 comes down on turn 4 that you can't deal with. So give yourself extra insurance against that while you're at it.
And King Togwaggle against these control decks, it's you summon a 5/5 and force your opponent to spend the mana to swap their decks back. And similar case of Mukla, if you draw any amount of cards from your opponent's deck, that's effectively discarding them.
Yes.
Because you keep them, and then when you switch your opponent's deck back, they can't draw that card anymore because you drew it, and it's in your hand.
Right.
So they kind of serve a similar purpose in a weird way, now that I think about it.
I slightly baffled by going face instead of just killing the 1/5 with the Mukla on the previous turn, because you just allow exactly this to happen. I don't feel like Mukla pressure is really going to end the game for Ghost in this matchup. I don't think that 5 damage is super relevant in most worlds, so that looks like kind of a weird decision to me.
Maybe he's willing to accept the cube on Mountain Giants because once he removes the Mountain Giants, they're gone for good.
Sure.
Whereas if he gives his opponent, if he doesn't bait his opponent into cubing Mountain Giants now, the cube will come down on Demons later, and he has to deal with those all over again with Blood River Gul'dan and Azoth. I don't know, just a thought.
So what you're saying is Jakattack just got baited and outsmarted right there. This is what Ghost wanted to happen.
Yes.
Okay.
I must move quickly.
Look, now the Mountain Giants are gone.
They are, but so is an equality.
He
and there
baited the cube.
And there is a Blood Reaver Gul'dan and an Azoth that still need to be dealt with, and that's one equality down already.
But what are they going to summon? Right now, nothing.
Very true. That is an incredibly fair point.
And there's one less Void Lord in the deck for them to even hit.
You know what, TJ? You're making a lot of sense right now, and I will shut up immediately.
Side effects? No.
This is actually getting quite scary.
It is.
Doesn't use bananas, and he can actually Ghost can actually clear here. He could Spellbreaker one, kill the other, and continue sort of this pressure train. And Jakattack has nothing, absolutely nothing. He's going to need to tap the following turn to even or draw into a threat.
Right.
And unless that is Zest Lackey into second Dark Pact, he'll have no way to immediately impact the board. So Ghost is in a great spot here, I think.
Yeah. He can just rip a Defile at any point now, then use the bananas to change the breakpoints however he wants.
Yeah. So Defile would be away. But for him to fully turn the corner and put his own pressure on and develop more towards his win condition, he still needs to find demons.
Yep. And Defile would stabilize, and it's not like Ghost is going to be throwing a lot of board pressure at him after this initial wave has been dealt with, but he is going to have to deal with like Coin Uther from this point anyway. And actually, this is kind of smart.
Yeah,
honestly.
Holding on to Spellbreaker for later on in the game with the only remaining Void Lord in the deck.
Right.
Which means N'Zoth will summon a Mistress of Mixtures?
And a cube.
And a cube. A cube which has no effect.
Yes.
Maybe trying to scare him into thinking I have Void Lord on 9. Buddy boy.
Right. I think he also like understands that he's looking at a Coin Uther here potentially, just the way the Ghost played that out on the previous turn. So putting it in play as a 5/6 discourages that play from happening, and it's a play that he really, really, really does not want to happen right now.
Reporting for duty.
And it doesn't.
He just go in with all of his cheap minions. Wild Pyro, Loot Hoarder. If any of them connect next turn.
Mind if I roll need?
Okay.
Your magic shall not save.
If any minion connects next turn, Uther is lethal. But then the Serenite Chain Gang comes in.
Oh boy. This is getting very, very dangerous for Jakattack, but that Serenite Chain Gang is going to do God's work right now, and even behind this, a Blood Reaver Gul'dan that doesn't do anything apart from give yourself a bit of armor and a hero power that can stabilize this situation for you.
But give up his life tap in a situation where he has no cards and has no demons that he has played so far this game.
Very true.
So, well, there's one.
Yeah. It's Gul'dan time.
And surprisingly, still not a bad card.
Yep.
When it doesn't even summon any demons. And like you said, can help him stabilize and maybe even start putting on pressure.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to pressure through the 15 points of lifesteal in the short term. It's more about just stabilizing him into a position where he can basically where he can just play proper Hearthstone again without just having to panic and try and stay alive every single turn.
Yeah.
If he can get to that point, he might be okay. Although, as you mentioned, the fact that he's so low on hand size right now and is only drawing one card a turn from this point is a big issue.
Yeah, there was actually, if there was no Blood Reaver Gul'dan or any heals, it was actually a lethal setup for Ghost. Because he played the Uther, he could have Wild Pyromancer coined, second Wild Pyromancer Call to Arms.
The frozen throne.
Right.
Which would clear off the 3 health Serenite chain gangs. And be able to push through with the Uther. And he's actually just going to make that exact play this turn anyway, and push some damage.
I get the logic, but that just looked really weird.
It did.
Yeah.
But, ooh.
Wow.
Wow. I mean, what good is N'Zoth even anymore? It's a 10 mana 5/7. Or you can have a 5 mana 5/7 with charge.
I mean, the N'Zoth did have a Mistress and a cube in it, right?
You're right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right, Subtle.
Right. So
I'm so sorry.
if no need to apologize, TJ. we all make mistakes. Did you see the last series I cast with Gia? There were a lot of them.
I was napping on a beanbag chair, actually.
Fair enough. Yeah. Jakattack gives up that game, and that Paladin is going to get the job done at the first port of call. And from what I've heard, this has been the deck that has been performing the best for Ghost when people have, like... Because the rest of Ghost games have been played off stream.
Yeah.
So when the players have walked back into the player room to report, it was like, yeah, the Paladin just destroyed me and just put I was too far behind in the series at that point. So this has been the deck that has apparently been doing the most work for him, and it's the other ones that are the real out of left field choices. As much as we like to focus on there being a King Togwaggle in this deck, it is at least an understood, recognized Hearthstone archetype that is being played in competitive tournaments by other players.
I'm trying to convince myself that at least. But I love the choices. Mukla sort of serves the same purpose as Cold Light Oracle in that regard, and he has 3 of those options in his deck because he has a double Cold Light Oracle in that deck, and it just seems like all of his decks are kind of designed to beat up on Warlock. And now that Jakattack's last deck is Warlock, can he beat it 3 times in a row is the question. Arguably one of the strongest decks in the entire game right now in Control Warlock. Can he defeat it 3 times in a row with an unorthodox lineup?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the target Warlock, like I can totally see how that Paladin does it. With just the extra tech cards really do make all the difference, because without those, it's not a phenomenal matchup for Paladin by any means. We see people with Control Paladin in this tournament still banning Warlock with their lineup, right?
Yeah.
But with those extra tech cards, it can really push you over the edge, and we saw that come into fruition with the Void Lord being burned and making all the difference there from that Blood Reaver Gul'dan. There just not being another Void Lord in play the whole time. The Shaman, of course, I can see that as well. You know, you get board pressure with the Jades coming down, and then when the annoying taunts keep coming back, there's Hexes, there's Devolves, a bunch of ways to just not even put them in the N'Zoth pool or the Demon pool, and then you can push through that way as well. The reason I keep talking about why I want to see the Druid is, like, I just don't know. Like, that deck is just so out there that I have no idea how effective that is against Warlock, personally.
It seems weird because you're not going over the top with Malagos.
Right.
You have to charge through, and with Deathwing, can you charge through enough Voidwalkers to get there? But
yeah, and the Druid is the deck that isn't playing the Cold Light Oracles because it has so much, like, natural card draw to itself with, like, Branching Path and Ultimate Infestation, but it's then playing Naturalize to, like, essentially do the same thing and fulfill that same role, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, slowly, little by little, once we decide to stop memeing quite so much, you can see there is, like, a very coherent strategy throughout this guy's lineup, and it is very much target Warlock. It's just, it's so out there, and that's why I wanted to make, like, that Frozen comparison, because they both end up in the same place, right? It's hard target. They're going to lose to, like, basically any lineup that doesn't have that one deck that they're targeting in it. But if they're consistent enough and they find enough Warlocks, or for Frozen it was Warrior, right, that he was targeting in the tournament, then they're going to do very, very well. Unfortunately for Frozen, it turned out his lineup didn't even beat the deck that he was trying to beat in the first place.
But it seems like Ghost is doing it. But I'm excited to potentially see the Druid in the upcoming match. But in the meantime, we're going to have to go to a very quick break. But don't go anywhere, guys. More HCT Sydney action right after this.
The Sydney HCT stop is proudly supported by McDonald's Australia.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the HCT Sydney Stop. I'm TJ, joined by Soddle, where in a land where Quest Druid may reign supreme, but we haven't found it out yet.
Nope, we are eagerly anticipating the moment where Quest Druid enters the fray. I suspect we will see it one way or the other, because either he chooses to queue it now, or he chooses to queue his Jade Shaman here and has a very favorable matchup against Warlock, the deck he is queuing into, and therefore will probably win and have to queue his Quest Druid in game number 5. So I think there is a very large opportunity that we're going to see that Quest Druid come out to play one way or the other. It's just down to GhostASA at this point, which order he wants to throw him out, and he is going to make us wait, TJ. What a guy.
Unlucky.
Yeah.
Theoretically a favorable matchup, but I feel like we've said that Ghost with the Shaman deck was in a pretty good spot in previous matchups and then just lost because you couldn't quite get there. But he has so many tools to just disrupt this whole demon cube thing that's going on.
Right. And that's the difference, right? Because in the previous game, sorry, we said, yeah, okay, he's in an okay position, but he'd got himself into an okay position by using tools that are targeted at Warlock to kind of do okay jobs against other decks. Whereas in this situation, you know, if he draws Acidic Swamp Ooze, he's not just going to jam it as a 3-2 and use it to fight for board early. He's going to use it to blow up Warlock's entire game plan.
Yes. He's not going to use Devolve to turn some really strong 5-drops into some 4-drops. He's going to use the Devolve to make the Warlock cry.
Yes.
By devolving their demons and ruining their synergies.
Turn 1, nothing to do ever for the deck. GhostASA just taking a moment to pause, consider his options. Of course, he doesn't have as long as he used to if he wanted to take the full ability to do that because of the turn timer nerf. But still just taking a little moment.
Turn timer nerf.
That's just what it was.
I guess. It's like it's something that needs to be balanced.
Apparently it was. I didn't do it.
They did say that most players wouldn't be affected by it.
I'm not most players, TJ.
You are not. You're not average by any stretch of the imagination.
I choose to accept that as the compliment I believe it was intended as.
But are you below average?
Let's not talk about that.
You're below average in height. As you try to compensate for every time on HCT.
It's true. It's actually like very relaxing to do an event sat down so I don't have to stand on my toes all the time to fix my crushing self-esteem issues. Hi, Reddit.
That amuses me greatly. Okay, not using the synergy now with the Murmuring Elemental. We save it to maybe where you can get a little bit more value out of it. And not that an extra 2/2 would even make the difference in this scenario. Make a juicier Defile or Hellfire.
Right. He has 8 represented with the Jade Lightning here anyway, which is the number that he needs to do if Mountain Giant comes down because he didn't have an answer to it in the first place. But it looks like he's just
crushing hand.
Right, he's going to go crush instead. Boom.
And he still will be able to Collide Oracle next turn and be overloaded for 3, so he'll still be able to potentially force Jakattack to even overdraw, but I can imagine we're going to see Possess Lackey coin Dark Pact here.
Yep. For so many reasons. Firstly, because it's just busted and you pretty much do this anytime that you can.
Yep.
Secondly, because it kind of fixes that Cold Light Oracle problem that you know you can run into, and Jakattack knows he has been burned once by already.
Yeah, it does. If he wanted to get really greedy, he could Possess Lackey, trade it in the following turn, and then
you
Dark Pact.
Sure.
But that's super greedy.
Mm-hmm.
And he would have been punished by Cold Light Oracle at least a little bit, so. Ghost is going to trade some stuff in. Cubing it now is very risky because you run yourself into Hex, those Doom Guards go bye-bye. Devolve, Doom Guards go bye-bye.
Right. And you actually have 0 read on Hex because there was only 3 mana available on the previous turn, so new Hex was actually unplayable. You could make the argument that maybe if Hex was there, the Doom Guard would have been hexed in the first place because it's just kind of the same thing, removing it from the pool. It can't get cubed if you Hex it in the first place.
Yeah. You could try and stick Spirit Singer Umbra, which would have the effect on cube, where next turn, if Spirit Singer Umbra sticks, he could, if both minions stick, I suppose he could be able to cube.
Right.
The cube. Transformers reference. The intro, the first Transformers movie. The whole speech that Optimus Prime does. Is it the first one? Might be the second one.
By Transformers movie, do you mean like an animated movie from the 90s?
No.
Then stop talking immediately.
No, complete Shia LaBeouf.
Side effects? No.
Actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf. That guy.
Yeah,
Okay.
that one.
Yeah.
Made his living from, I believe, dancing in music videos?
Yeah. So yeah, despite even the Possessed Lackey Dark Pact happening on 5 with the coin and plowing through a Mountain Giant, Ghost has just got himself into a very clean position here.
Yeah.
And it was honestly, for a while, it was like the implied threat of everything he could do to blow up Jakattack's game plan, right?
Yeah.
Like, he couldn't just dump a cube on the board because of Hex or Devolve, which like weren't even in hand at the time. He tried to drop a Spirit Singer Umbra because he didn't have another activator for the cube afterwards. And like that delay of Jack just not going all in gave Ghost the time that he now needed to draw the Hex, which he now has available to blow up those plans in the future.
And can kill both of these Doomsayers with Kalamos, and just continues to pile on this pressure. And Jakattack just doesn't have a great way. Hex will be enough to at least make him live, but it's going to draw out the Hex.
Yep.
And then he's going to be sad once again. He can Hex Murmuring Elemental, Cold Light Oracle.
Oh my, that is kind of savage, and I love it. It's giving me strange tingly feelings, TJ.
Is he going to go for it, though? That's the question.
Aww.
What?
I don't understand.
What's it even there for if you're just not going to do it? Especially if he's just going to do it next turn. Why would he not just do it this turn? There's absolutely no difference, I feel.
Maybe in this matchup it just has to hit Jade so you can run out of threats to end the game?
Supposedly, but he could have just done this last turn.
And now he gets to do it twice with both Cold Lights in the same turn, I guess?
I guess, yeah.
My hand is too full.
Maybe that's the nod.
Right.
But you still would have overdrawn 2 cards. I guess at this point you overdraw.
And actually, no, he can't, because he doesn't have board space to, like, replay the same 2 minions again, because it's only your next battle cry happens twice, right? So he'd have to play both
he could
again.
trade.
Yeah, I guess.
He could trade in one of these minions. Or he could just do the second one. You still overdraw 3 more cards at the very least.
Yeah. I don't know. He's in a really good spot, whatever he did those last few turns. His work has kind of been done at this point. He didn't find a Devolve or anything to deal with the second Void Lord, though, which means it can now potentially go into the pool. And actually, it's kind of smart to not trade at that point.
Yeah.
Because if he traded his own minions in to make room for the extra Cold Light, then he couldn't just leave it on board for a turn. But it seems like that's not his plan anyway. He's just going to go through and deal with it.
I actually don't really like killing it here, because you haven't seen any of the big 10-mana cards discarded, and now you give him an extra Void Lord.
Right.
So it was very likely that he had one of those, but Jakattack's just going to go with something different. He does have 1 Doomguard still left in the deck.
Mm-hmm.
So many possibilities.
So he can get it out and trade it in.
Yeah, he can use the Defile here to get it out immediately if he wants to. If he... Actually, no, he can't. He needs one of his 1/3s to still be alive to chain across to the 4. I was going to say he can throw them both into the Kalamos beforehand.
Not quite.
But nope. Yeah, this is one of those turns where the rope appears when you're playing Warlock, because there are so many things to consider. It's one of those turns where you waste 60 of your 75 seconds just counting Defile, and then realize you haven't thought about any other play for the entire turn, and then just do something. Yep, there you go. It's exactly what happened.
Well, he does clear the board, and it has a pretty decent Blood River Gul'dan or N'Zoth going into the next turn. But his deck's quite empty at the moment.
Right.
And more Jades.
More Jades indeed.
And with the Evolve in hand now, N'Zoth and Blood River Gul'dan will not be able to stop these Jades. and even getting in the extra damage. So, yeah, that's almost out of cards. And I wasn't paying full enough attention.
Did the first Doom Guard die, or did it get hexed? The first Doom Guard died, right?
It's just game?
Yep.
Oh, wow! For some reason, I thought it got hexed, but that was the Void Lord that got hexed.
Right.
So Ghost just didn't have enough stuff to end the game, and Jakattack finds a way, and we're not going to see the quest through it. Takes his 3rd win of the day, moves up to 3-0, and goes to that upper bracket finals.
It looked so, and that looked like a really clean matchup for the Shaman.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I don't even begin to pretend to speak with enough authority on that matchup for anyone to like listen to what I say.
Yeah.
But the moment where it's potentially seemed to go wrong was like the Cold Light Oracle turn. That's where he seemed very unsure as to what his game plan was. He was obviously fishing for a devolve or something to be able to answer that Void Lord to stop it going into the pool. After that point, when he realized that the Void Lord had to stay up, he kind of looked in 2 different minds about what he wanted to do with it, whether he wanted to let it live,